Then I'm also very happy to have Brigitte Ratzer on my side. She is, so to speak, a sister in arms. Those who do not come from a technical university, I just can tell you, you may have a lot of problems at your home institutions, but you haven't seen nothing yet.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank Elisabeth for inviting me to share the Austrian experiences with you. That's why I'm here. So this is a talk that is about the third column of the agenda that we have. It's about fix the women, fix the institution, and fix the knowledges. And so, may I have the pointer? Thank you. What I'm talking about is this third perspective of fixing the knowledge. Actually, we are facing a very interesting situation in Austria in the moment because about 1-2 years ago, our two major funding agencies decided to get on gender politics, and actually they include in most of their programs, nearly all now, the question of the balance in the research team and of the gender perspective within research. So this was, first of all, it was surprising, and then maybe this one goes out to the representatives of funding agencies here. It really helped the situation. Because Vienna University of Technology is a very traditional university. We don't have any social sciences, humanities, or something else, just pure engineering and technology stuff and sciences. And they never would come by themselves to ask the questions they now have to answer when applying for money. So that's maybe the background situation. What I want to share with you now is first experiences that come out from this situation. Because what we see now is that all those researchers that never ever thought in their life about gender and gender perspectives are now obliged to think about and to somehow integrate this into their research. And this causes a lot of problems, of course. Before showing you one case study that I think is very inspiring for thinking about what they need to really do a proper job, I just want to also share some general ideas that I have on working on this topic. The first is that we are speaking about rising the quality of research, actually. So, but what is meant by this quality? I just have some brief ideas. Usually, when mentioning quality in research and innovation, so that's also the strategic papers from our governments, it's about products to succeed in business. So it's a sort of business case. And in the Austrian situation, that's maybe not the case in all other countries. They are obliged to meet some ecological standards. So that's what they usually have learned to include there. And then quality is there and everything's okay. Sometimes now, and this is also some sort of business case, there starts to be something like a user orientation. In order to meet the markets, there start to be some questions like, for whom is this research beneficial and who is or who remains excluded when we put this or that question or design this or that technology. Some of them even perform better, and they start really to think about something like, I termed it problem orientation, to come up with questions like, in which world do we live and what do we need for this world where we live in, what kind of technological devices and artifacts are needed there. And I think it's like the Mount Olympus. Some really come up with other questions that I think is the question we have to put in. I termed it like design orientation. It's in which world do we want to live actually, and what would we need there for? Because not everything that we find in our world that we live in now is the things that we really want to have in future. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. And just one remark because of the question of why women are not there in science, engineering and technology. This is because they don't want to be there. I think it's that they see what's going on in these technical departments. They see what kind of questions and what kind of products are dealt with there, and they decide not to go there. But, as we've heard many, many times within the last 2 years, it would be very important to include more perspectives, so also more women, also other people, of course, that are not represented, because I think it's only a very small part of a population that is really represented in these majors. And so I think in shifting these questions and in coming to frame it in terms of which world do we want to live in and what can you contribute there, we could also attract more girls. The other problem is the problem with how to include the sex and gender stuff. So we've already learned, and it has already been mentioned, so I just go very quickly through that there is this Gendered Innovations homepage hosted by Stanford, and there's also a EU extension there. So all the information that I'm giving you now on this slide you can find there and in much more detail. It's just to point out that if you want gender to enter research, the researchers need to know that, first of all, sex and gender are different things. This is not very clear, especially not in the German-speaking countries, where we use the same terms for both sex and gender. And so, of course, sex is, and we have already heard by this very, very nice speech from our colleague from Sweden, is of course fundamental in biomedical research and a key consideration of product and system design. So there you have to consider sex as a variable and to think about what we're doing with this. But very often sex is overemphasized, and this is where sex could be irrelevant, or at least is not the key variable that we should think about. So sex differences are sometimes asserted without sufficient evidence, and differences between men and women are improperly attributed to sex. This is especially true in software design, so that's the example that I come up with in a minute. What's also to be asked is if gender is relevant, and if gender is on the agenda, then this is about asking what people are you really designing for. So is it it's not about stereotyping, actually it's to avoid stereotyping, and that's what we see very often happens when people that are not familiar with gender aspects and gender research start to think about gender. They do bluntly stereotype. So the last dimension, and this is also one question that very often comes up at the Technical University where I'm from, is the question, maybe there is no sex and no gender aspect. Yes, it's true. There are some circumstances like material sciences, when they just go for some new materials with some specific properties, no gender aspect there. The construction of a bridge, no gender aspect there. But, of course, in the planning of the bridge, where to locate it, gender aspects there. So you have to distinguish between when the questions of sex and gender apply and when they simply don't. So some of them simply we can release and say, okay, you mustn't think about that, just do your research. So now what I want to show you now is why I am sure that this is about quality of research, to include the gender perspective. And I want to show you one case study that one research project that we are still conducting now. And just briefly reflect with you on what happens there. And I can't read my paper, so I need the eyeglasses right now. First of all, emphasize that it is really important to have gender experts in these teams, because the scientists that we have in a technical university, and I think that's very typical for all those technical universities around, at least in Europe, they simply don't know anything about gender. So the low level of previous knowledge in science and in the organizations themselves and at the individual level of the researchers fosters blunt stereotyping and essentialist perceptions, actually. So that's what they come up with. And they aggravate the gender gap rather than removing it. So this is what you see when you have this shrink it and pink it things around. So many, that's also when it's a business case that they come up with some pink devices, and then that's the one for the women. And of course it's a little bit smaller than, because women's hands, maybe they are smaller. So the project I'm talking about is about gender inclusive design of user interface development. It's an ongoing project, and the project goal was simply the development of a specification list for gender-inclusive user interface development, and to create a tool that supports gender-inclusive user interface design and makes it available to software developers as an open-source tool. I've learned during this project that there are many design guidelines also from companies like Apple or Microsoft, and none of them includes any gender perspective, which I really find astonishing, but it's true. So there are no differences in users addressed there. There are just guidelines for all of them. This is the research team. It's typical. Oh my God. This looks like, but it's very typical. But I just want to point out the three males over there. They are the electrical engineers. They are doing the programming work. The three black and white women, they are from the usability center. That's not unusual that usability work is done by women, actually. And they have very different backgrounds, like anthropologists, social scientists, or communication studies. And me, I'm the gender expert there. So when they started the project and invited me to come in, they came up with the question, the central research question, that was, do men and women display differences when interacting with user interfaces? We had a long debate on this question, and then ended up with another question, that is, do men and women display differences when interacting with user interfaces, or are characteristics like age, education, or previous experiences with ICTs of greater importance? So what we simply did, and it's really just a small step, we included other domains of life and questioned if there really will be sex differences to see. Then it was about coming up to the theoretical suppositions. I didn't think about that, but the research team from the Usability Center, they said, okay, we want to have some hypotheses, and much to my surprise, they came up with a hypothesis from evolutionary psychology. So this is for every one of us is familiar with that. You don't know that it's termed like that, maybe. This story is about man the hunter and women the gatherer, and why men can't listen and women cannot read maps and all those stuff. So from this, they derived some hypotheses that simply said women should have the tools because inherited tools from ancient times for underestimation, and thus show lower self-efficacy levels than men. Men should show higher levels of self-assessment regarding computer activities, because that's also what we asked them, the persons that we tested. And men and women should show different navigation styles and strategies when seeking for online information. So this caused another workshop and another big discussion, and we ended up with another hypothesis. We had the hypothesis that we don't have any idea what we're going to find. We're just going to have a look. So what we did, you mustn't go into details, it's just to show you the sampling, because I think it's crucial what persons you include if you do usability studies. It was like 80 users, half of them male, half female. And then we also introduced the other variations like age. This is like digital natives are persons younger than 30 years. Digital immigrants are persons older than 40 years in our setting. With diploma or without diploma refers to education background. And with smartphone, this was 1.5 years ago. At this time, smartphone possession and smartphone usage really made a difference. You couldn't use this today. You should have other dimensions like ICT pre-experiences. So, expected results. Without some gender expert, they would have come up with a result looking like that. So they had some features on the website and they say, okay, men, they prefer this and that, and women, they prefer this and that, and this is how the world is made and how we should have our devices programmed. Actually, with the background of this evolutionary psychology, they also would have been able to explain this in terms of inherited properties from very, very ancient times, and nobody would have wondered about. What we ended up with is another result. We see that there are some features, actually it's nearly half of the features that we found out about the website that we investigated in, that don't have any gender aspect, but they have other aspects like younger people have a commitment to some features, or uneducated people have problems with some other features and so on. So you see that's a very, very different story to tell if you do it like that. And to finish, I think I have to finish right now, you don't have to look at that at all. It's just to see that that's part of the results that we came up with and that we're going to also put on our website. It's open access to that. The website that we tested, this may be interesting, was from a tourism advertising. So you could do some hotel booking there and inform you about some tourist activities in one special part of Austria, and it was very badly programmed. So what we in fact could test there is that you could come up with the idea to say, okay, so there are many, many different people and they have many, many different needs, maybe also with regard to user interfaces. So maybe it's a good idea to pack everything in one site and so everyone can find whatever he or she likes to have. What we can see from our results is that this doesn't work at all. So we can tell you, don't try to put everything into one single usability device. It doesn't work. Nobody is happy with this. None of the addressed group there. So this is also one side result. Now, to finish, what I just wanted to end with is, I think it's very crucial to include gender perspective in all our technological devices and artifacts that we are developing. Because technology is shaping reality actually, so your mobility, your forms of communication, everything depends on technical devices and so on the design of them. And shifting the world and society towards a better, progressive future is also shifting technologies towards such a future. And if you imagine a world where discrimination and disadvantage, so this goes to this last point, this this design orientation, where you think about what world do you want to live in, what kind of devices do you need there, what would this world be like where there is no discrimination and no disadvantage? What will it look like and what kind of technical artifacts do you need there? That's the sort of questions and the goal for designing technological artifacts that we need to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a few minutes for questions or comments.
Okay, sorry, technology. I'm Catherine Didion from the Committee on Women in Science and Engineering at the U.S. National Academies, and I enjoyed your talk very much. I think I just want to try to clarify something, because you were talking about whether or not there's a gendered component to material science and nanotechnology, if I understood you correctly. And one of the issues is separating the knowledge acquired and what the knowledge is being used, or the context of that research and knowledge. And for instance, at Carnegie Mellon University, the percentage of women that had in computer science degrees was around 8%. And they changed that in 5 years to over 40% by changing the context of what that degree was going to be done. And what we have found, particularly in engineering and material science, that many times the research that's been often funded in the U.S. has had a defense-related research. And that has discouraged women. But if you put it in a context of why you're going to do that research, that often that can change who is there, even though, yes, it's true maybe that women don't do physics differently, but that context becomes very important in whom is attracted to that field. So I just wanted to clarify what you were saying there, but I enjoyed your talk.
Yes, actually, I totally agree. That's what I at least wanted to say at that point.
Okay, so I'm happy to have this example because we just hired 2 new faculty from CMU, so we can profit from their experience. And another question, comment?
Okay, thank you. My name is Nema. I'm from Nigeria. I've quite enjoyed this conference, and I've listened to the gender mainstreaming. I represent an NGO, and we've done some work with the National Universities Commission on the main problems of students, especially female students. In fact, they hired a legal NGO to do a study on the problems. And I haven't heard, one of the major problems we identified was sexual harassment of female students and the cultism, which is a form of, violence against the female students and, some other male students. And I haven't heard anything on human rights in all most of what we've been talking about is about access to, to being recognized in the science and technology sector. And I don't know if there is no human rights issue for female students and, and the lecturers in Europe. Thank you.
Elizabeth, maybe you would like to react?
Okay, I can comment on that. There has been a concern about sexual harassment in research labs. And action has been taken by certain labs, such as CERN, who has got a very specific culture of being very international and different. There are collisions about the different cultures. And one thing that CERN has done is to actually look at other labs, how the sexual harassment is reported, and then compare their own situation with the other labs, and have actually taken action to make the reporting of the sexual harassment much easier. Obviously, there are very few women in CERN, and I have personally received emails from guys at CERN saying this is a very special situation in this kind of international labs where the cultures are very complicated, and they have observed. So this is guys telling me about sexual harassment of women. So they are saying they observed this harassment actually happening. And so what sort of a situation, so what kind of a provisions science institutions can have, because they are in a kind of a dealing with a very complicated situations where you have maybe sort of a national legal provisions how to deal with discrimination and harassment, but within the science itself it might be taking place in a kind of a different ways than it actually takes place in society. So there are examples, and we certainly have some papers. We have not included this in the program because it is a big issue and because there is another DG that does deal with human rights. Yes. So.
I may briefly comment from my point of view at ETH. So our PhD body consists of 2/3 foreigners. So we certainly encounter these kind of problems, people coming from very different cultural backgrounds. So I think it's very important that that the board of the school or the administrative sections concerned with these kind of questions really react, and react, if need be, drastically. So women who come into a similar situation know that I'm taken seriously and that the board of the school will react to such cases. So I think that's very important. But I'm sure that at other institutions similar strategies are put into action.